Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing fine. Today I'm here to talk a little about fatherhood as an interesting topic in psychology. You might have heard about it. Today I would like to share an example from therapy room which perfectly illustrates a classic representation of such an emotional trauma. I have already talked about motherhood and the ways it can manifest itself, but today my focus will be on fatherhood. Also these two are similar at many levels, and both relate to the ways our parents have treated us in childhood and our perceptions about their existence in relation to our existence. They can still be very different and may result in different type of reactions, as the other factors, big factors which play roles at society and cultural levels will also impact the way these kind of traumas will affect us and how they will be expressed and play out by our unconscious mind afterwards, for example in our relationships. So if you have got a feeling that you have never had a good and healthy relationship with your father and there is something off there, then you might have been suffering from this wound, unfortunately. I have realized that there should be something common which many people with father wound have experienced, and that is about a desperate feeling of waiting for him to come back to them finally and recognize their pain of being neglected, of being ignored and left behind. And this whisper of wish has been present in and reported by all of those beautiful souls who I have met so far. So we know that it will affect our relationships in adulthood. However, there are still some people who ignore that because their ways of understanding the situation is like, all children at that time that I grew up had like that, and fathers were out to work and they did not have the opportunity and time to be present for us. So I think that we should be aware of the fact that absence is about neglect trauma. And it does not mean that if there was not any visible or harsh exposure or trauma episodes, you were not affected by your father's absence and then you were safe. Trauma should not necessarily be about visible happenings and memories. It is not only about controlling an abusive father, but also about a father who was, stuck in his own traumas and wounds and could not protect you and connect with you because maybe he could not be accountable enough, neither toward himself or toward you. I hope that you are not among the people who have got a traditional viewpoint and philosophy toward life and psychology and accept just the past and or destiny as a normal inevitable fact without being curious about whys and hows. If so, I invite you to start thinking differently about this issue and see your life closer, to check out if there is any scar and footprints of father wound in your current life or not, because the impact is huge, and it is not only our relationships but also our career life and our functions in general which will be affected by such unresolved emotional traumas. So we know that father wounds develop by multiple possible reasons. For example, if your father was an addict, abandoned you, or his family was abusive and exposed you to psychologically and physically violence, or if he did something very devastating like rape or sexual abuse, or that he was just physically present but not emotionally and psychologically present. So I would like to share an example from my practice here with you. I had a client, a young woman who had several suicide attempts and got hospitalized due to major depression disorder for a few years ago. And that was actually the first time of hospitalization, and therefore it was a very scary experience for her. She had a tighter follow-up plan and attended the intensive care program. So here her story was just touching and very tragic. It made me sad and I felt enormous empathy for her when I realized how much pain she went through her, and that the father wound was the root of her struggle. I noticed that she has just needed to tell about her story, and she was really in need to see someone comprehending the pain she had endured. So she had initiated a relationship with a married man who had 3 kids. She entered this relationship because she found him very generous and caring and warm, and she said that at the beginning of the relationship he was so kind and he spent money on her and was caring. She fell in love with him and got emotionally dependent on him, and she felt that he noticed that she was deeply in love with him, and then he gradually began to take distance from her and appeared to be occasionally unavailable and even very cold to her sometimes. So she had a very tough time waiting for him, calling him, chasing him and begging for getting him back, but he refused to answer her. So she got suicidal for the first time in her life, and she was surprised how she was reacting this time, because she saw herself as an always a strong girl who could easily cut men out of her life, but this time she could not stand it to get rejected by this man. So I got curious about what she had done to make him stay in her life. So she did obviously everything for him. And sometimes she begged him, even though she felt inside that she was downplaying and making herself totally unworthy in her own and his eyes. So I asked her if she had, loved someone in her life like him before, and she did not answer by words, but she cried. And then I asked the most important question. I asked her to tell me about her relationship with her father, and then she depicted a tragic story, sad story. Her father left his family, wife and 2 kids when she was around 3 years old, and then he fell in love with another woman and just disappeared from their life. So her mother got married to a new man who was abusive, unfortunately. So her stepfather was both psychologically and sexually abusive, and had several times said that he did not want her and her siblings in their life. So then I tried to orient her attention to the fact that this is too painful for a kid to feel. The total experience of both abandonment and also rejection and abuse by a stepfather. And in addition, apparently her mother's passivity in relation to this situation was very tough to tolerate for her as a kid. So I wanted her to relate herself to this fact, to this experience, and see and embrace it emotionally. I asked her to talk about that little child's experiences. How was for her to perceive the abandonment and abuse by them? It was not difficult to see that she finds it very overwhelming and so tough emotionally. She burst into tears and said that she wished to be a boy. Perhaps then her father did not leave her. Perhaps he could stay and protect her. And she also said that she had always had some thoughts about being not good enough as a kid or as a person, and thought that this idea is about this abandonment experience. And it was so true. Yes, it is. So she was thirsty. She was so needy for love and care from a protective father figure. And this empty room in her soul played out in her relationships. So she literally could not see and predict the sound and healthy signs of a romantic relationship. For her did not exist an accurate and well-functioning relational map which she could use in connection with men. her psyche was exclusively occupied with craving and fulfilling the need of being seen, of being heard, of being held and cared by a caring older man, regardless which prices she is going to pay. So when her lover appeared to be emotionally neglectful and cold, it made up an emotionally devastating experience, a very overwhelming, sad experience for her, because it was felt like she was re-experiencing her pain again. And this was not the first time she was attracted to unavailable or emotionally unstable older men who sent her confusing messages of love and passion and care. That was not the first time for her. She was living in an elusive bubble of affection and passion and care from men who were actually surfing on their own ocean of emotional traumas and ties. So, and by the way, another thing that I figured, not only in relation to her story but also in other people's story, was that many with father wound and also mother wounds may seem to have unrealistic expectations and goals and perspectives about multiple topics and things, inclusive relationships and romance, especially in relationships. So this is not strange, because I assume that they lack the true and actual experience of love and being seen and understood and heard and taken care of by their absent parents. Because the meaning of experience of authentic real love for the child is to feel that he or she is alive and is experienced, is embraced and accepted as he, with all sorts of emotions and reactions he has in the body, in the existence of the parent. And based on this acceptance of this fully and literally acceptance, the kid may receive good feedbacks and admiration and reflection on the fact that he is good and lovable as he is, and so on. So when such a profound experience is missing and has not ever been touched or internalized by the kid, by his body, then the way they connect to their surroundings and peoples and in relationships and different topics will be based on a very narrow and not nuanced and logic approach, where expectations and wills and desires will be just at some level very unrealistic and restricted and not reflective enough. So as with her case, there were disordered boundaries and expectations, and she was just easily attracted to men regardless the situation, regardless considering the situation of herself and also that person. She did not care to match with an older married man who was actually committed to another woman and had kids. So to her soul, the most important thing was to find the food of care and attention of a father. And she, like all others with father wounds, did everything to get the attention. She did a lot against her true self-values, and in order to keep him, the father, in her life at the cost of her belittlement and downsizing her worth. And this destructive compensation strategy and pattern was used by her throughout her life in different forms and situations and levels. So I think that one of the most important steps for healing and recovery is to identify that the problem lies here at my side. Because for many people who suffer from father wound, it is just difficult to acknowledge, difficult to recognize that the reason why they are not satisfied with their relationship is not always their partners or the problems of their partners. In many cases it can be about ourselves and all the issues and wounds which we bear from the past. So to integrate these overwhelming experiences we need help, and first of all awareness and insight. So this integration process will be tough, of course, but when you really dare to integrate all these interruptions and pains and wounds and incorporate them into your life narrative in a safe relational space where you allow another person, like a psychotherapist or your psychologist, to witness this profound journey, this process, then it will happen. Then healing will happen, and you will hopefully be free. And then the real caring men and people will appear in our lives. So I hope that you have found this story interesting. So please share your thoughts and experiences here with me, and let me know if you want me to make a video on a specific topic. Thank you again for being with me. We'll keep in touch. Take care. Bye.